Hello, my name is Daniel, and I really like Pokémon. It was a core part of my childhood. I loved the games, the TV show, I collected all the cards, even though I never learned how to actually play them. I would spend hours replaying the same game over and over and over again until I got the newest one. I had Pokemon annuals, and I had plushies, and... Oh, I'm sure this is just a once-off issue. Okay, so there has been a lot of discussion about whether Pokemon is going downhill. With the latest game, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, getting flooded with mass refund requests and a whole bunch of angry discourse on Twitter, it's clear that people have some strong opinions. I've heard people say that the Pokemon companies is a cash grab now. They say that the new designs are uninspired, that they're too complicated or too simple. It seems that the whole Pokemon fandom can't decide what they actually want. Of course, my first thought when seeing all of this is, well, just to deny it. I don't want to see the flaws, I just want to love my stupid squishy Pokemon with their dumb faces. Now, I won't bother speaking on the game quality, nor do I need to, it's just an objectively badly made game. But what I am more interested in is the Pokemon designs. I'm not an expert designer by any means, but I spent a lot of time looking at these silly creatures. And besides, what's the point of studying animation if I can't use my very expensive knowledge? But before we can decide if the Pokemon have gotten worse, we'll have to cover some Pokemon history. Don't worry, you don't have to know anything about Pokemon to understand the video. Okay, so Pokemon began in 1996, with its first game, Blue and Red. This game had 151 unique Pokemon designs. Quite impressive to have so many unique designs, especially when you keep in mind the technical limitations at the time. Because this game was made for the Game Boy, which was a black and white console, and each design could only have black, white, and 2 shades of grey. On top of this, all the sprites had to fit into a 56 by 56 pixel box, which is very small. I tried to see if I could, draw myself in this little box, and it was very difficult. There's not a lot of room, and it's very hard to get any sort of detail, so I'm sure you can imagine that the designers had a bit of trouble trying to fit a whole Charizard into this tiny little box. So in order for them to actually fit everything in, they had to keep things very, very simple. You'd also be playing on a little tiny Game Boy screen, so you can't have anything too complicated. All of these factors would end up making what is known as the Gen 1 of Pokemon. All of the mainline games in Pokemon have this generational order, and each game develops and changes the style ever so slightly. But whenever there's a technological jump in the medium, the style changes way more noticeable. I found this interview online that was taken from the Nintendo Power magazine. It was published in March 2011. In this interview, game composer and game director at Game Freak, Junichi Masuda, and Ken Sugimori, the character and art director for Pokemon, talk about their newest game, Pokemon Black and White. I'm going to reference this interview throughout the video, and I'll make sure to type out the quotes on screen as well. I think that what they're saying conveys exactly what I'm trying to explain, and it also sounds way more legit when the actual designers say it. Masuda says, "Advances in the hardware have also impacted the style of Pokemon over the years. High-resolution platforms have allowed for more detailed designs, and each game to follow has followed that principle. Each game has better graphics and more detailed designs. Even the second game in the series, it was made for the Game Boy Advance, which introduced color, which can do a lot to differentiate Pokemon and to give them some more personality. The anime also got quite popular over this time, so Pokemon designs were made a bit more rounder and cutesy. The Pokemon games would stay in pixel art style up until Gen 6, where the game took its first leap into 3D. This was a big leap in characterization. You can get so much more personality from the Pokemon by how they move and interact with the world. And this gave designers so much more room to experiment. They could have much more complicated designs because now seeing it in 3D gave it some more clarity. Pokemon could have movement and life, and there was so much more animation possibilities than there ever was before. Well, there could have been more animation, but why would you bother animate the most powerful move that the box art legendary can do? At this point, there was already some beginning dispute about the game's quality, and you can't blame them either, the animation was atrocious. But the franchise continued to grow and develop. With Pokemon now a global phenomenon, designers would face the challenge of designing for everyone. Trying to find a Pokemon that would suit each individual niche of the Pokemon community, but also be exciting and new, is a very difficult task. In that interview, we also get to hear Sugimori talk about how each game has its own design trends within it. Mr. Masuda asks us to play up the coolness of the Pokemon in black and white. So we're using a lot more sharp and angular lines, rather than the more rounded ones. But a lot of it is just that we have different character designers working on different generations of games. I think the group that worked on black and white gravitated more towards cool designs. Here Sugimori explains how even back in Generation 5, the designers had older players in mind. From the very beginning of development, we tried to see the series through the eyes of older players, who had graduated from the series. Does it seem too cute? Is the writing off-putting? Is it too childish? We wanted to change these things to make it more appealing to older players. I think we've covered enough history now, so let's dig into the actual Pokemon design. If we compare some of the old designs of Pokemon to the new, you'll see that some things have indeed changed. But also, a lot stay the same. Like, you can't say that Pokemon are lazy nowadays. Oh my god, Flamigo's the Flamingo. Old Pokemon were way more creative. Rattata from Gen 1 is just a rat. Ekans is just a snake. Also, Ekans spelled backwards spells out snake, so the name design isn't exactly groundbreaking either. I think the biggest trait from early Pokemon is how they were shaped. These Pokemon took a lot of inspiration from real-life animals, and in a sense are just fantasy versions of real creatures. Later generations have more conceptual designs. If you're used to Pokemon just being cartoonified, furry friends, then you might see this in the newest game and be a bit confused. I think a good way to see how they've changed is if you look at all the fire-type starters together. You can see how each design becomes more detailed in every iteration. We also see that these Pokemon start having second concepts attached to their designs. If we look at Charizard, its design concept is just that of a dragon. Which isn't bad, it's very marketable, very easy to understand, especially for young kids. But if you go on a few generations, you start to see secondary concepts like a magical fire fox or a kind of luchador wrestling cat. I think this shift was put in place to keep the designs new and fresh. After all, there's only so many times you can make just a dragon. But these designs became more specialized to fit the theme of the game that they were in, which means that they lose some of the generic appeal they once had. Charizard can fit into any game because it is just a fire-breathing dragon. But if you remove the other Pokemon from their game, they seem out of place. In the newer generation of Pokemon games, the location that the game takes place in really influences the design of the Pokemon they make for that region. For example, in the recent game, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it is taking place in Spain, and therefore there's a lot more Hispanic-based designs. And at first these designs might seem a little odd or out of place, but when you play the game and you see them in their natural environment, it makes a bit more sense. But that's just my own opinion. Why don't we ask some of my friends to see what they think? And it'd be interesting to get a different viewpoint than just my own experience. I want to talk about Pokemon and how they're designed.
Okay.
And how, they're made to look like really cute so everyone likes them.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Pokemon?
My favorite Pokemon would be Eevee.
Eevee, that's a good choice. I like Eevee too. Eevee's very cute. Why is Eevee your favorite?
Because I really like the colors and she looks really woodsy and I like that kind of stuff. If you were in the woods and you kind of like see them.
A forest animal.
Yeah, kind of like a fox.
If you could have a Pokemon in real life, what one would you want?
Lillipup.
You have enough dogs already though.
Even though I have 4, I want 1,000. I think my favorite thing about Lillipup is his button nose. That's what I like about him.
What do you think makes Pikachu so cute?
I think it's because he goes Pika Pika.
He's got a very cute voice.
Yes.
Okay, so you're probably the most well-versed in Pokemon out of anyone I know.
Big compliment.
Is it a big compliment?
It is.
More recent Pokemon designs, they tend to be a lot more conceptual, from what I can tell. So, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so in past games, a lot of designs were kind of things that were cool or things that were realistic, given more monstrous form. In more recent games, Sun and Moon, for example, set in a Hawaiian-like version of Pokemon, a lot of Pokemon have really solid lore and genuine mythologically based designs. So one of the starter Pokemons that you first get is Rowlet, which is a cute little round, very adorable owl. And a lot of people picked him because he's so round and cute. But when he finally evolves, he becomes a grass ghost type owl, which sounds a little bit weird. Cute little guy in a bow tie turns into a big Robin Hood looking bird. In fact, that design is based off of an extinct Hawaiian owl. So you have a cute Pokemon that turns into its dead self. A part of this is due to Hawaii's very spiritual nature and like mythology and stuff about spirit guides and stuff like that. So I started Pokemon that is a extinct form of owl that's possibly dead. Being a spirit guide for you as a trainer is kind of a nice symbolic thing.
Do you think that has to correlate with the kind of backlash on new designs because people don't know the concept behind it?
I think that can come into a lot of designs. Something that looks really, really simple actually has a lot of history or lore behind it. Even just having a Pokemon like Copperaja, a giant Indian elephant set in the Galar region, which is an off-branch of Britain. Britain had a colony in India, so it would make sense that they took over Pokemon from, there is no Indian Pokemon set game at this moment, but the existence of Copperaja in Galar would imply that there is an Indian equivalent to, there is a lot of small things that people might not see. It's just like, oh, there's an elephant in this region, it's just green and brown, like copper, it's a copper elephant, wow. But in fact, it goes into the entire region's lore and history with other regions that we're not even aware of yet, so yeah.
What do you think about the criticism that a lot of Pokemon are like too simple, whereas in like Flamigo, for example?
Flamigo. Well, in Gen 1, and many people go to Gen 1 for some of the peak Pokemon designs, there is Krabby, a crab that is orange. Just like the pink lawn ornament that is Flamigo. So I don't think simple designs are anything new or should be looked down upon. Like even in Gen 3, like again, a game that's highly regarded for its designs and world, Pink Cat, Skitty, Kitty with an S. It's not a unique thing, and there's gonna have to be some boring or lesser thought out designs to pack out a Pokedex, because that just is how the region is. You can't have everything being super deep and meaningful, but that doesn't make it any less Pokemon. It's not a bad design because it's a pink flamingo. Just bringing forward new ideas that people are pushing back against because it's not familiar to them.
Yeah, because it seems that everyone is complaining about the high concept Pokemon being too hard to understand, but then they also hate simple designs.
Yeah.
So there's no real middle ground.
The middle ground is nostalgia.
Yeah.
A lot of people now look back to Gen 5 as one of the best games story-wise, and a lot of their designs are now regarded for being more sharp, dark, and edgy, which is something that the producers wanted to do because the story was a darker story that Pokemon had not seen before. So it's a lot nostalgia-based. You might hate a design currently, but in 5 years' time, compared to newer games, you might think, damn, we were doing so good back then, what's happening now? And that's just a cycle that's been constantly repeating for the past 20 years.
What do you think makes a good mascot Pokemon? Because there's like Pikachu and there's Eevee.
They have to be equal amounts cute and cool in some state. The original mascot for Pokemon was supposed to be Clefairy, or Clefable, I'm not sure which one it is off the top of my head. I think it's Clefairy. Which was a pink round ball with a curly tuft on its head, and eventually that got phased out into Pikachu. So Pikachu had more of a cool aesthetic, and Pokemon has always been more of a shonen genre for boys, and that is kind of the icon of Pokemon to this day. Eevee has been adopted as a secondary mascot, which again, very fluffy, very cute, but also has
Potential.
It has edgier elements, can evolve into pretty cool looking Pokemon, like Jolteon and stuff, very spiky, very edgy looking.
Or Sylveon.
Very
So, best of both
pink.
worlds.
Yeah.
I found it interesting as well. You talked about how your favorite Pokemon is Skitty,
It is.
but not for its design, but for its own nostalgia towards it.
Yeah, Skitty is, we mentioned it before, was the pink cat that's just named as Kitty with an S. I never nicknamed my Pokemon and accidentally went into the nickname function, couldn't get out of it, and named it Siffy, and ever since, Skitty has been my favorite Pokemon because it was the first thing I ever gave a nickname to. So, it has a lot of personal attachment for that reason. What's your favorite Pokemon?
I really do enjoy Gengar, but as a kid, for a solid, I'd say 10 years, I would have said Lucario. It was fully because of the Pokemon movie, though.
Oh, very interesting.
Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, I believe it was called, because he had a whole emo thing of like not wanting to trust Ash because his trainer betrayed him, and in
Didn't
the
Ash
end,
tackle him down a hill into a river?
he did. And then Sylveon was my next one because trans rights.
Woo!
Um,
It even works when it's shiny.
yeah, it does. Also, a Pokemon that evolves through like friendship and love.
Can't go wrong.
So good. I mean, if you want to talk about personification of Pokemon, having to literally be friends with it for it to evolve.
Absolutely, you cannot get more character and personality into a Pokemon than that. Like, it has to love you to evolve. It has to love you to get stronger. It's very sweet. The last game that Junichi Masada, who's the head of Pokemon Company, he directed, produced, and worked on every game up until Let's Go Eevee, which that was his last game he worked on extensively. And after that, there have been more complaints about Pokemon design not being like Pokemon, especially Sword and Shield, which was the first mainline game post his departure. Off the top of my head. I never played the game, so I'm not going to pretend that every design is terrible. I played it, it's terrible. But a lot of people complained about designs not feeling like Pokemon in that game, or that game being too easy. It was very linear. There wasn't a lot of story that you could get involved in. And that was one of the biggest complaints for that, ever since he had left.
I mean, the starters were some of the worst in my opinion, some of the worst we've had.
Some of the most human looking starters, which
Yes.
is a bit awkward when you're like a 12-year-old walking around with a huge lizard man.
Yeah.
Bit weird.
I want to end this video off with another quote from Ken Sugimori, who was the lead in Pokemon design from 1996 until present and the creator of the original 151 Pokemon. So a Pokemon needs to seem ferocious enough to be potent in combat, while also look endearing enough that you want it as a friend. We can go back and forth about whether Pokemon has declined, but it's hard to prove something that's so based on our own nostalgia. Have the designs actually gotten worse, or just that we ourselves are just no longer children playing the games for the first time? I think instead we should focus on who this Pokemon is for. The newer ones may look odd to those who grew up with the games. The shape language has changed, and new things are scary, especially since we hold our childhood memories so close to us. But there are kids today who are just beginning their journey. These new designs aren't just for us, they're for them. The world has changed a lot since 1996, and thus Pokemon has changed a lot too. The designers are mindful of this change. I think Corsola is a perfect example of this. This was a Pokemon that was first introduced to the games in Gen 2, and then was brought back with a new Galar design to fit the new region. And you can see that the Pokemon designers are clearly very aware of how the world has changed over the years. Some of the new designs are bad, they don't feel like real Pokemon, but that's always been the case. Every generation has a couple duds, but the Pokemon Company has also stated in the past that every time they make a design they think everyone is going to hate, someone out there loves it, and that is their favorite Pokemon. And even if some of the newer designs might seem a bit off to us, there's probably a little kid out there, and that was their first Pokemon, and they love it with all of their heart. And they're gonna look back in 10 years to think that the game that they grew up with was the best Pokemon game there ever was, and that the newer ones just aren't the same. Okay. I can't look at it. I can't look at it recording because then I know it's there. So...
It's too far away to pick up the voices.
Because then I'm just too aware of my actual voice. Oh, what a brilliant story.
I want that kept in.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
I want a blooper reel afterwards.
Please.
Look
to Pokemon enter through wormholes. I think that's fucking fantastic. I think it's fantastic.
There's the clean edit.
No!
What is with Pokemon and having just the sexiest villains?
Don't say that in your essay, Danny.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted now.
Yeah, you are.
Pokemon boys. I know nothing about the actual... I don't even know all the type advantages.
Oh, Danny.
I know, it's pretty bad. I know fire, grass, and water, and that's probably about it. Do you want to comment on how the cats just can't stay on all four legs?
I don't. I have a very personal bias against Pokemon with very human traits. This game is pocket monsters. They are monsters. Monsters do not play football and look like Cristiano Ronaldo's persona. When you are given James Bond in a lizard suit, it's really hard to give him any other personality that isn't I'm James Bond.
Yeah.
But I think in an overall Pokemon game, it's very hard to make that seem like a Pokemon and not just fan service.
Yeah, it seems very much like furry bait.
You can use furry bait in your essay.
I mean, I could.
I don't think you should. For example, my giant water dragon, that is Gyarados, loves playing football without feet. He's so good at it. He's Gyaragod and he's great. He's so good. So you had to work entirely with brand new Pokemon you had never seen before. Hello.
Yes? Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. It's okay.
I was wondering, okay, never mind.
What are you wondering?
I was wondering who was making voices.
Give a Pokemon interview.
You.
This is going in the blooper reel.
I think that's all we have to talk about.
Yeah.
This is literally 30 minutes long.
Bye!
Thank you!
Thanks, Danny.
Bye.
Bye.